and welcome to the Planning Committee. And Councillor Lewis, I'm sorry to hear about your accident and wish you a speedy recovery there. Yeah, all right. Yeah, just the evidence. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, court cases in the new year. So, no, welcome to the Planning Committee all. And the first item on our agenda is any apologies for absence?
Only from Mark Tribe at
There
this
was
stage,
one,
Chair.
yeah. Thank you. Any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests? Are there? No? No? Okay. So item 3 then is to approve this and sign the minutes of the previous meeting as a correct record. You'll find that on pages 1 and 2. If somebody'd move it, as a true record, thank you very much. And then no items for withdrawal. Yeah, no. Move on to item 4 then is the determination of planning applications under the Town and Country Planning Act, and the first one we have there is on page 6, which is actually for the Guildhall. Ian, you're going to.
Thank you, Chair. Before Steve Smith comes in and gives a presentation, I'll just give a brief overview as to why this application is coming before committee. In 2021, there was a change to the regulations in relation to listed buildings and conservation areas, so that where the council is the applicant, the application now has to be brought before committee rather than be considered under delegated powers. The constitution's been updated, so that situation is reflected in the constitution. As you'll note from the recommendation, if the council are minded to approve, it does have to be referred to CADU. But that's just a brief overview really as to why you may see more of this type of application come into committee now than you would have in the past. Thank you, Chair. I'll hand over to Steve now.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I can't. Are you sharing this presentation? Ah, there you go. For that too. There you go. Okay, right. So this item is in relation to the listed building consent reference number on the screen there, 2023 21 11 LBC. Description of the proposal is installation of a digital screen in court number 2 to match the court number 1, which is in use now as the coroner's court. So the Guildhall itself, the red line there you can see on the screen, was listed actually quite late. So it's quite surprising to know it was listed grade 1 by CADU in 1994. So a building of this importance only being noticed quite late on there. The CADU listing description for the whole Guildhall complex states that it was given that grade 1 listed status as the most important building in Wales of its period, with fine internal spaces and an outstanding example of the work of an architecture of particular significance to Wales. Next slide, please, Ian. And the CADU listing information indicated at the time, the block to the southwest, which is the left on your screen there, was in use as the law courts. There were 2 courtrooms there. If you know those spaces there, one side was the civil courts and one side was the criminal courts. So they're basically identical with very simple classical details. And that's the part that I think since 2017, since the Ministry of Justice moved out, those courtroom spaces were vacant for a number of years. I think they were used for various films and various things like that. But now, really positively, they're fully back in use by the coroner. In the past, when, as you heard before, as Ian was describing before, prior to the change in regulations, there was a previous audiovisual digital upgrade carried out to the court spaces, which includes previous digital screens, which was determined by Welsh Government planning, submitted in March 2021, so prior to the change of the regulations, and that work's been completed. And since the coroner has now been using the space, they need an additional digital screen, which is in that court number 2, which is the one outlined in red there. So next slide, please, Ian. So this is court number 2, so the one where the application is proposed. It's on the wall that proposed there. It's a rectangular digital screen, and the location of that red circle there just to locate you on the right hand side within the court space there. Next slide, please. if you're looking at a plan of the courts there, that's where it is on the wall there. The size of the screen is 75-inch flat digital screen located between two kind of column details in the plasterwork of the wall. And listed building consent is required because it's physically fixed into the listed building. And it also has to have data and power cables. So there's various conduits which hide those cables, and they're either painted out to match the plaster or they're made of timber to match the timber benches on the side there. And next, slide please in, and that's a digital, that's a representation of how these screens are going to look. I think the coroner uses those as reference for when there's a hearing, and then everyone who's in that courtroom space can have access to that digital information on the walls there. So it's an honest and contemporary intervention, supports the ongoing use of the courts, the proposals have been fully assessed against listed building legislation and your LGP policies. So the proposals are fully supported to allow the continuation of the courts in positive use, no negative impacts on historic fabric or internal character. And the recommendation on the agenda report there is approval with conditions, and it requires referral to CADU for the final sign off. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Steve. Right, any comments, any questions? Councillor Downing.
Just the one, it looks as if those screens are bolted to the wall. So they never thought of doing this, because these are standalone, aren't they?
So yeah, the screens have to be fixed somehow. There's previous installations with screens onto the walls. Often with the screens fixed to the floor, there's a lot more structure involved. You're in the Gloucester room there. Some in other spaces, it involves going down through floor finishes and all sorts of things in order to secure them properly. So the least impactful way of fixing them would be basically a plate on the wall, and it's fully reversible. When you remove them, those holes can be filled. And it's been done before in the other courts in the Guildhall.
Okay, thank you for that. It explains that. Anyone else? Okay, sure. Okay. Sorry, Alan.
Just a minor point from my point of view. I don't know whether it's an optical illusion, but the screen looked very small to me for the size of the room. I don't know whether that has any bearing on whether it would go ahead or not.
Well, there's already a matching pair of screens in the other court space there. It might be the size it's been done as a graphical image, and it's to allow people in that courtroom space. There'll be one, but this will be the second screen in that room, so there'll be one either side as you're looking in there, and it's exactly what the coroner's requested, the size of screen, so it must meet their requirements.
Thank you.
See no other hands up to speak. No, it's been moved by Councillor Lewis that the recommendation is approved. So we'll take a vote on that then. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Peter Black. For. Bill Downing.
Or
Alan Jeffrey.
For.
Mary Jones not present. Sarah Keaton not present. Mike Lewis.
Or
Richard Lewis.
For.
Nicola Matthews.
For.
Mike White. For. Andrew Williams.
or
And Paul Lloyd.
Yeah, I'm for.
That's unanimous.
Yeah.
Okay, 9-4.
That's carried unanimously. Thank you. And then we're moving on to agenda item 5 then now, which is the update on the SPG, the conversion of traditional rural buildings. And Tom, it's yours, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. For this item, I'm going to share a few slides for the benefit of the committee. So I will just share my screen and start the slideshow. That's the item.
this is the idea.
Yes.
What is the function of this? Where's the address?
Where is the address of
This building?
that particular building?
Yes, yes.
Do you know, I'd have to get back to you on which part of the rural area it is, but I think there's 4 photos on there, and I can define. Yeah, I can find out where they are, but
Going back 10 years, We did a similar thing.
Microphone, councillor Lewis.
Going back, can you hear me now, sir? As we going back about 10 to 12 years, we actually had this sort of thing put before us as a committee, which was very interesting. And in it, there was an article there, and it was for one in By South in Penrice. It was in our book for what we want. This is what we were hoping we could get, right? Now, the guy who owned By South there put in exactly as we asked for it. And guess what? The planners turned him down. Now, to be honest with you, I suspect this is the same one because I remember it because I had a number of site visits there. I just wondered, so I'd be very interested to know. I'm sure the agent who lost the case 10 years ago would be very interested to see if this is his old barn.
Well,
Anyway,
there we are, councillor. I will make sure that you find out exactly where each of
And
those
maybe-
4 photos are taken from. And
I
I'll
may be
confirm
wrong,
that.
Chairman, but I like asking the question.
Okay, let's. I'm just going to start with just a little bit of background. Obviously, the report itself is covering a relatively short report. It's pages 14 to 18 in your agenda pack, but the SPG itself is attached as appendices, and as ever with these documents, they can be relatively sizable, but this one's only about 40 pages or so, this piece of planning guidance. But the other appendix to have regard to is our consultation report, and I'll flag that up on a future slide. So, as I say, by way of background, this is a piece of planning guidance that supplements a policy of the LDP. In particular, that one referenced on the slide, CV4, the conversion of rural buildings. It's also important to supplement a policy on development in the countryside, and that is policy CV2 of the plan. It does replace an existing SPG, and that picks up on what the council was mentioning there, something that would have come before the planning committee at that time, some sort of 10 or 12 years ago. But the reason for needing a new piece of guidance then is that it has become outdated. It was adopted against a previous development plan. The national planning framework has changed somewhat, and there have been a number of interesting appeal decisions that have highlighted a need for just a bit of clarity and a bit of certainty for decision makers to come out of some supplementary guidance that augments the policy. The other thing that it can usefully do, and that it does, is to bring a consistent approach with another piece of planning guidance that the committee has approved in recent years, which is placemaking guidance for the Gower AUMB. And there is a detailed module on that covers the sort of issue of replacement rural buildings. So by bringing this document in alignment with that, we, as I say, we ensure a consistent county-wide approach. And you know that final bullet there is what it's all about, really. The purpose of these is to make sure when it comes to the decision-making process, but individual policies of a development plan can only go so far in terms of the level of detail. In some cases, it's useful to have guidance that just brings a little bit more clarity and brings examples and so forth to some of the criteria that are set out in a policy, to make it clear how that policy should be used in the decision-making process. So that's exactly what it does. We've just got a slide there with some nice examples of the variety of buildings that can be described as traditional. You know, we've got our sort of stone barns and so forth, but we've also got things like churches and chapels, and in some cases even historic buildings that have been used for other purposes, non-agricultural, but that have really become embedded in the landscape and form an integral part of what makes the countryside attractive, and really that's an important element of again what this guidance is all about. It's about the proposals that come forward on the traditional buildings, which are different from all of the buildings that we find in the countryside, because there's such a variety, but there's something unique about those that are defined as traditional, and I'll come on to that in terms of the issue of definition. So I bought a report before committee earlier in the year, back in August, and members approved a draft version of the document for consultation. That was undertaken over an 8-week period. I've highlighted on the slide there a number of methods that we use to get that message out, using our usual corporate procedures, but also because it's quite a unique and specialist area of planning policy. Then there was some targeted email that went out to some of those sort of organizations, consultants and specialists that tend to operate in this sort of area, to try and get some of their input. So we did have quite a range of issues highlighted. It was from a limited number of respondents, but the amount of sort of meaningful planning issues that were raised were significant. So it was a very, very useful addition to the process of producing this document, the engagement, the consultation that we did. And in particular, we've highlighted there issues surrounding, well, what do we do in what's particularly unique about those buildings of importance for heritage, what we need to do in terms of linking in with the most recent guidance relating to biodiversity enhancement, and also this specific issue of the impact of light pollution. A little bit more was needed on that. So those are some of the examples of the changes that were made, and we do now have a final version that has reflected a number of the representations made. And as I say, that in the appendix has a consultation report that sets out our responses to every single point that was made. So really just a very quick recap of the key issues which I'd set out originally when the draft version was brought before the committee. You know, the guidance covers in section 3 is a particularly important chapter in the document, and it helps define exactly what is meant by traditional. This is something that I mentioned a moment ago. It makes clear the distinction between all rural buildings and what is meaningfully considered a traditional one that's worthy of safeguarding, and it picks up some of the detail there on the things that decision makers will consider in terms of materials, its age, what was its what role and purpose of the building historically. All of these things are important, and it's always an on-balance decision then as to whether this the building passes the test of being a traditional one or not. It emphasizes and it covers some of the issues around business use and how we are looking to be permissible for, as a planning authority, for the appropriate sort of business uses. There is still that the sort of desire for buildings that are already used for industry and for beneficial sort of business use to be used as a preference in established sort of industrial areas. So it does depend on the nature of what that business is. Not every business use is going to be appropriate within some sort of converted barn and so on. But where a case is made that it's relevant to the sort of countryside location, then absolutely that is supported. So there's some detail on that. And there's a chapter then, section 4 really deals with, helps the applicant go through the whole development management sort of checklist, all the things that we would require of an applicant in order to meet the or sort of address the criteria in the policy and meet what the guidance itself is highlighting are important issues for any application to address. Just the last couple of slides then, that this is a key issue that's dealt with in the guidance. There's some detail on where will an application be considered a fundamentally new build, a new development in the countryside, and where will it meaningfully be a conversion? That is, again, can be an unbalanced decision, but it's useful for the decision maker to have some guidance on this, and we've consulted on this, some of this detail, including a sort of percentage that we've used to describe, or what's the extent of the area that can be newly added to a structure whilst still considering it a conversion of a building. When you get beyond that sort of threshold, you're really getting into the realms of something that needs to be substantively rebuilt, and really that's new development in the countryside, and there's different policies for considering that kind of development. So that's an important distinction to be made, and the guidance is going to be useful on that basis. So just as a last slide, this is the recommendation that's on page 14 of the agenda pack, and there's two of them. The principal one obviously is for the document to be adopted as formal SPG to the adopted development plan, and also for us just to, as officers, as we produce the final version, or publish it on the website in a bilingual format, then we can just make some of those factual amendments, and perhaps even reference where some of those photos were taken. That might be useful as well. Okay, so that's it from me, and obviously any questions, then free to answer.
Thank you so much, Tom. Councillor Lewis, you got your hand up there?
Yes, I did. I noticed on the slides, Tom, that a lot of these buildings are agricultural farm buildings. And going back pre-COVID, I've got to ask this because we had an enforcement notice we had to rule on, where a couple were living in a building which 60 years ago used to be a dairy, and the why they were the planning department were asking for this was because it was an agricultural tenancy. So as these buildings are agricultural buildings, will that agricultural tenancy still apply to these new bills, and how does that sit with the agricultural tenancy enforcement order that we were asked to rule on a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago?
Okay, well, that come straight back on that one. That's a very useful reminder about the residential use of traditional buildings, and this obviously, as I mentioned, this guidance builds on it doesn't create new policy, but it builds on the existing policy that's adopted. And what the LDP says about that is that the residential use of such buildings for conversion should be limited to either for business uses, tourism accommodation, and so on, or for affordable housing for local need. Or there's a sort of specialist subcategory of agricultural workers dwelling, which is very much tied to the individuals and how they use the land, whether it's for often for agriculture. So what that does is omit the open market residential use of the building, and that is what the policy lays down as being the requirement, such use, and this guidance does emphasize that, but it's a very clear requirement of the adopted policy in any event. So I don't know the circumstances of the individual application. I think Ian's happy to come in to talk about the individual case, but the principle is that if it's used, if it's restricted for that use, then the conversion itself would continue to be restricted.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the case you're referring to, Councillor Lewis, there was originally a condition which restricted to agricultural enterprise the occupation of that dwelling. So whoever lived there had to be employed in agriculture. We did vary that condition following an application, so it extended out to wider rural enterprises, not just agriculture, or affordable housing, as Tom mentioned, in terms of the policy. So that restriction, if you're approving dwellings, as Tom just mentioned, there would still be conditions attached to residential uses to restrict the type of use that could, or the type of residential occupation. So it wouldn't grant market housing, it would be limited to rural enterprise or affordable housing. And in the case you specifically mentioned, the occupiers weren't complying with the new condition or the old condition, and that's why enforcement action was taken.
So, Councillor White.
Yeah, I should explain, Tom. Obviously, some of these buildings are very, very old, and it quite clearly states about what type of materials you can use. But if these plus materials are no longer available, what would be deemed as acceptable that they could be advised to use? Like, you know, because they've got windows or the roof or things like that.
Yeah, again, it's a good one. A lot of that is determined on a case by case basis, and we've got to be, as a planning authority, we've got to operate within the terms of reasonableness of what materials are available and what is economically viably available as well, in order to convert that building. It links in as well to that issue of the heritage or buildings of particular merit in terms of their heritage value. So that's why we put a bit more guidance in there in terms of, there's legislation to accord with in that context, where there will be might need to be particularly stringent in terms of determining what those materials are, and there may be flexibility in other cases where that isn't of such an overriding concern in terms of in accordance with that particular legislation. So it's difficult to say that there's a rule of thumb across the board, and it does depend on the individual building, and that is the interesting aspect about this. I provided just some examples of the types of rural buildings, but they can be quite a range of sort of type and form. It's not just your stone barn. Frequently that is found in areas like Gower and some of the northern hinterland areas of the county, but there are quite some sort of quirky other sort of types and forms, which as I say, the test is always, does it is considered an integral part of the countryside, and does it add particular value to the attractiveness of the setting and that countryside area? And that's an important issue in terms of determining whether or not we consider it a traditional one worth safeguarding.
You've got to look in the history of it. Gower at one time, most farmers would have 10 to 12 workers living in accommodation, and they carried on. But when you look at, there are still a number of farmers, especially families, where they really run the families run the farm, whereas they'd have 10 or 12 people working. With modernization, things change. Now, in Bury, there was he had a very he had a barn there, a barn conversion there, which I went and had a look at it, and he did a magnificent job. And the thing is, he said to me, it's just something for a weekend to rent out, sort of from for sort of an income to coming in. Well, he did a brilliant job, and it does look good. Well, he said, of course, the only trouble is now I'm working 7 days a week because it's rented out to the holiday business, to the wedding business. And when you look at the wedding business throughout Gower, it brings in over 30 million a year. And they probably employ more people today than the farmers ever did. And you've got to look at what is there, because you can have a wedding business in Gower, which is a lot cheaper than London or Birmingham or Manchester. You've got the views down here, which are tremendous. But we need to make sure that when we are looking at businesses, we help the business, because they are the breadwinner for certainly for the Gower. And I think we've got to look at them with that thing. And this, you know, you've got to look at how can we improve it? What can we do? And you go to other towns elsewhere. I saw in Cornwall, they had some wonderful ideas of how they improved the villages and stuff like that. And I think this is what we should be looking at. I think the AONB put a car park on the top of Kevin Bryn. Well, to be honest with you, if that was the best the AONB could do, it's you know, if you had it's rough stones round the outside and a rough surface. I mean, where's the thought that's gone into it? It's a vantage point. Kevin, the King Arthur stone is down there. Now in Cornwall, they've got a similar. King Arthur must have been a busy boy because he must have been in Wales and in Cornwall, right? But the one down in Cornwall there, it's laid out. It looks like a King Arthur's stone. Not you have to walk through a half a mile of mud to look at 3 stones on top of each other. I think we could do a little bit better. And I'm sure and then the car park, oh, it's atrocious. I mean, and the same thing, they've walled in one of the greens opposite the King Arthur to stop people parking there. And it looks a mess. I just don't understand. We've got a wonderful opportunity here in Gower. We should be making the most of it. And the other thing is this, where there's we had an application for a plot of land, and the planners suddenly changed that the garden belonging to the house is no longer his garden. It's the boundary for the village is his front door. When he steps out, it should be on council land. But you know, we don't seem to help the people, and I think we should look at it. And then what they've done in Railston, they have made a circle around this farm, but between there and the corner, there's another redundant farm, which has got to be done sometime. But I'm sure they'll have a hell of a job at planning permission. But Chairman, all I'm asking for is if we look at things with a different perspective, the agriculture will continue, and if you get people coming in with dairies, or they want to do some of the ones, there's one actually going up Lanettley way, and he is making a fortune. He sells bottled milk there, everything you want. It's open 24/7. Marvelous. And I just think we should be looking at ideas. People come forward with ideas how we can do it. Let's do it, Chairman. And you, as chairman of the AONB, I'm asking you to sort of have a quiet look over some of these areas that it's your domain.
Councillor Lewis, you got your hand up again? Yeah.
Yeah, just one more question for Tom, if that's okay. You mentioned earlier in your reply to my question that these houses would be, one of the uses would be affordable housing. How will we ensure that that is continued to be used as affordable housing? It could be built for affordable housing. It could move a family in there. When the family moves out, could they then sell the property, or how would we ensure that the ongoing property is used as an affordable dwelling?
Okay, again, that's a useful one to just clarify. So if we go to page 34 of the agenda pack, then that covers a section of the guidance, which so it's from paragraphs 3.22 through to 3.26. And those provide guidance on exactly this point about affordable housing for local need. And it, on paragraph 3.25 in particular, it notes that if a converted building is intended to be considered as an affordable dwelling provided directly by the intended occupier, the initial and resale value of the affordable home must be capped at an affordable level linked either to fixed multipliers, local incomes, or the discount to market value. And it highlights there very clearly, given the very high market values of rural housing in the county compared to household incomes, the council will determine affordable housing at the fixed multiple of local incomes rather than a reduction of market value. So this is something that's imposed on the property, goes with the sale of the property. So that sort of guarantees that the individual property is maintained as such in perpetuity.
Okay, thank you. Any?
Sorry, and that would be in the lease, would it?
Right.
Sorry. I said, Tom, and that would be in the lease of the property when it's
So there would be a legal agreement likely to be signed in that instance.
okay, thank
But
you.
there are other planning mechanisms that are available for that.
Okay, thank you. I got no other hands up to speak, no? As Tom said, you can see the two recommendations there on page 14. To take a vote on two together or separately?
Yes, yeah.
Together? Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Peter Black,
For.
Bill Downing,
For.
Alan Jeffrey,
For.
Mary Jones,
For.
Mike Lewis,
For,
Richard Lewis, Nicola Matthews,
For.
Mike White,
For.
Andrew Williams,
For.
and Paul Lloyd.
Yeah, 4.
Unanimous again, Chair 10-4.
Thank you very much.
you're on mute, Chair.
Sorry, yep, beg your pardon. So you can see the next item 6, page 110 is the draft countryside access plan. And Chris, that's yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This has been brought to Planning Committee to seek approval to go out for consultation. With these plans are governed by legislation which requires us to go out to consultation for 12 weeks. The plan is the second plan that we produced, the first one being dated 2007. So it's rather late. We're supposed to do one every 10 years. That's my fault. Basically, it is a strategy for how we are going to manage our rights-of-way network, with one or two bits and bobs in about access land and so on. We've got over 400 miles of footpaths and bridleways, mostly on Gower. There's about 2/3 of it in the Gower A and B. They have an important role to play in the economy of Gower, because people come to Gower specifically to walk, and other people will come to Gower and use our footpaths to do things such as access the beaches. So I'm not sure whether you're aware, but the rights of way network we have caters for mostly walkers, but also horse riders and cyclists. All of it off-road. We also have a rather nice coast path, which around Gower is 35 miles, the total coast path being 57 miles. And again, that plays an important role around Wales in attracting visitors to the coast. I'm rights of way also have an important role in health and well-being. There are now goodness knows how many studies demonstrating that walking outdoors in a green space is good for you physically and mentally. So it's very important that we manage the network that we've got as well as we can, given the budgets and grants available to us. But the recommendation is on the front page of the report. As I said earlier, basically we're seeking approval to go out to consultation to the public for 12 weeks, and then we would amend the plan as necessary, and then it would have to go to full council for approval sometime in the spring. I have to also say that to encourage you to go with the recommendation, the Welsh Government have offered us a grant to improve rights of way, and one of the requirements is that we have a rights of way improvement plan or a countryside access plan such as this. So there's £25,000 at stake to improve the rights of way network if we actually go ahead with the plan. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much. A little persuasion there.
Yeah.
Well done. Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Well, it is important, Chairman. It is important because we get a lot of walkers these days coming down to Gower, and we've also got two properties that rent out barns to more than 10 people, and of course they all bring their horses down. And when you've got the Rossilli Downs over there, you've got access straight onto the downs for horses. It's a marvelous one, and I think they're busy right through summer and winter. They're bringing their horses down. They can everything is there. Stables are there for them, food, water, everything. And of course, if you go into these bunk houses, they've got underfloor heating. They've got wonderful showers. They've got things there for wet weather. If you come in off the moors with your horse, and then the other thing is this. Well, the only other one that I did see was at Three Cliffs. There was a shower for dogs, just in case they weren't tidy coming in. So I mean, we do cover things for them quite nicely, and I think if he can get the 25,000, good luck to him. That's what we say.
Thank you. Any other member wish to speak? No, or questions?
No, just wondering, when's the consultation close? And I hope we have more response than we do with Tom's last report. We didn't have many back there, do you, Tom?
Yeah, it was a wide range of issues, but the actual individual ones are limited. It was such a specialist area, though.
Yeah, thank you. But do you wanted to know how long was the consultation? It's
Shall I answer that?
Last week.
Yeah. No, I'm going to, if you approve us to go out to consultation today, I'm going to try and get it out to consultation as soon as possible. So next couple of weeks, we've got to advertise in a local newspaper and get it out to as many people as we can. So we're talking 12 weeks after the end of next week, probably.
okay.
When's the closing date for the Welsh Assembly? We want this 25,000. We don't have our closing date before their closing date.
No, they've actually promised us the money if you approve it today.
Oh well.
I'm not trying to twist your arm. Okay, yeah. No, thank you, Chris. Yeah, it's been moved. Look, the recommendations are on page 110. And that is approved for public consultation and reported back as amended to the council. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Peter Black. For Bill Downing.
For
Alan Jeffrey.
For
Mary Jones.
For
Mike Lewis.
Or
Richard Lewis. Nicola Matthews.
for
Mike White.
For
Andrew Williams.
for
Paul Lloyd.
Yeah, for
Unanimous again, Chairman.
Wow.
10-4.
hat trick. Thank you. Yeah, right, and thank you all very much. And see that our next meeting is in the new year on 9th of January. Thank you all.